buried under ash, sunk in sacred lakes, or carved with warnings no one can fully decode, some Roman artifacts still refuse to give up their secrets. One holds the oldest Latin inscription ever found, written in a style where each line reads in opposite directions. Another contains plumbing so advanced, it had hot and cold running water over 1900 years ago. One skull was once dismissed as unimportant until tests revealed it may have belonged to a Roman hero who sailed straight into a volcanic eruption. Even emperors lost to history might be hiding in plain sight, etched into coins no one believed were real. What ancient truths are we still missing? The eruption of Mount Vesuvius in AD 79 didn't just wipe out Pompeii, it also took down one of Rome's most brilliant minds. Pliny the Elder, a military leader and the author of natural history, was one of the few who didn't run from the ash cloud. He sailed straight into danger. Why? To rescue others. But he never made it out. He died on the shores of Stabiae, just across the bay from Pompeii, probably choked by toxic gases. His body vanished. For centuries, no one knew what happened to his remains. But in the early 1900s, everything changed. A man named Gennaro Matrone was excavating ancient ruins near Stabiae when he came across more than 70 skeletons buried in volcanic ash. One of them stood out. The skeleton was found lying in a sleeping position, surrounded by luxury. Gold bracelets shaped like snakes, a golden necklace, a sword with ivory seashells in the hilt. Matrone believed this was Pliny himself, but no one took him seriously. He got frustrated, sold the jewelry, and reburied the bones. He only kept 3 items: the skull, a jawbone, and a sword. Those bones sat in a museum in Rome for decades. No one really looked into them, until recently. Scientists decided to test them again. What they found reopened the mystery of Pliny's final moments. Let's start with the ash. Researchers found volcanic ash clinging to the skull, proving that it had been buried during the same eruption that had killed Pliny. That alone put the skull in the right time and place, but there's more. Isotope analysis, basically studying the chemical makeup of the teeth, showed something really specific. The person spent their early childhood in northern Italy, especially around Como. That's exactly where Pliny was born and raised. But then things got complicated. A dental wear test suggested the person died at around 30 to 40 years old. Pliny died at 56. That sounds like a dead end, until they looked at the skull's sutures. Those are the places where the bones in your skull fuse together as you age. The sutures said something different. One test showed that the person could have been between 33 and 58 years old. Another test gave a range of 48 to 65. Pliny was right in the middle of both. So why the mixed signals? It turns out the jawbone doesn't match the skull at all. Anatomically, they don't even fit together. Scientists examined the joint where the jaw connects to the skull, the temporomandibular joint, and confirmed they came from 2 different people. The DNA confirmed it too. The skull showed typical Roman ancestry. The jawbone? It came from someone with North African roots. So here's what might have happened. When Matrone found the skeleton, the jaw was missing. So he may have added another one, possibly from a different eruption victim, just to make the skull look complete. This second person could have been a sailor or a soldier. Back then, a third of Rome's sailors were of African origin. The jawbone's DNA and isotope results suggest the person may have grown up in Italy but descended from North Africa, maybe even from Numidia, an ancient kingdom where modern-day Algeria is now. Back to the skull. It belonged to someone buried in Vesuvius ash. It came from northern Italy. It was found wearing elite Roman jewelry, and it likely came from a man in his mid-50s. Everything lined up with Pliny. But we still don't have proof. One researcher said the only way to be sure would be to find a living descendant and compare their DNA. That hasn't happened yet. So, is it him? No one knows for sure, but this skull might be the only physical trace of one of the Roman Empire's most important thinkers. And it sat in a museum drawer for decades, nearly forgotten. In 1713, 8 ancient gold coins turned up in Transylvania, now modern-day Romania. 4 of them looked like typical Roman coins. The other 4 didn't. They had a different name stamped on them. Sponsian. Not Gordian, not Philip, Sponsian. A name that doesn't appear anywhere else in Roman history. At first, people thought these coins were real, but by the 1800s, scholars changed their minds. They said the coins were fakes. The designs looked crude, the names were wrong, and nobody ever heard of Sponsian. Case closed. Until Paul Pearson came along. Pearson isn't even a coin expert. He's a geologist from Cardiff University who studies climate change. But while writing a book on Rome's 3rd century collapse, he came across the strange story of Sponsian. It stuck with him. Why would someone fake a Roman emperor in the 1700s? And why would the fake coins look worn out, like they'd actually been used? He contacted the Hunterian Museum in Glasgow. They had one of the Sponsian coins. When he looked at it, he had noticed something odd. It didn't look fresh. It had wear marks. It had dirt, not just on the surface, but embedded deep in the metal. So he got a team together to test the coins properly. They ran multiple tests, including scanning electron microscopes and chemical mapping. What they found surprised everyone. The coins had been in the ground for a long time. They had been circulated. They were old. The dirt wasn't just sprinkled on, it was baked in. These weren't modern forgeries, these were ancient artifacts. The team tested 4 coins total. One featured Sponsian. The other 3 showed Gordian III and Philip I or II, both real Roman emperors. All the coins were found in the same area, and all showed the same kind of wear. That suggested they were buried together. That changed everything. If the Sponsian coin is real, then maybe the emperor was real too. So, who was he? Here's a theory. Around AD 260, the Roman Empire was falling apart. There were plagues, civil wars, economic crashes. Armies broke off and declared their own leaders. Rome was so chaotic that it's possible someone like Sponsian could have ruled a remote province, even if no one wrote about him. Pearson thinks Sponsian was a local military commander in Dacia, what's now Romania. When the empire collapsed, Dacia was cut off from the rest of Rome. The legions needed someone to take charge. Sponsian may have declared himself emperor to keep order. The title IMP on the coin stood for Imperator, a word Roman soldiers used to honor victorious generals. It didn't automatically mean emperor, but it often led there. Some scholars still push back. They say the lettering is wrong, the design clunky, and they question why someone would invent Sponsian at all. But Pearson flips that argument around. Why invent someone no one has ever heard of? If you're going to fake a coin, why not use a famous emperor and make it look perfect? Why go through the effort to make it look dirty and old? That's what makes this case so strange. If these are fakes, they're really bad fakes. But if they're real, they might be the only proof of a forgotten emperor. And that's what makes the Sponsian coins one of the Roman Empire's biggest unsolved puzzles. Now, think about this. 2 ships the size of modern mansions, built not to cross oceans, but to float on a volcanic lake, barely 1.6 square kilometers wide. That's like parking a cruise liner in your backyard pool. And yes, Emperor Caligula actually did that. We're talking about the Nemi ships. One was 73 meters long and 24 meters wide. The other, just a little shorter, 70 meters long and 20 meters wide. Both were constructed under Caligula's reign in the 1st century AD and packed with tech that was way ahead of its time. They weren't warships. They weren't cargo vessels. They were floating palaces packed with marble floors, mosaics, private baths, plumbing, and heating systems. Some researchers even believe they had rotating platforms, basically ancient motorized stages, and possibly hypocaust systems for central heating. Now here's the twist. These ships weren't out at sea. They were anchored in Lake Nemi, just 30 kilometers south of Rome. That lake wasn't just small, it was sacred. Roman law said nothing should sail on it, but Caligula was obsessed with Egyptian and Greek luxury, especially the Isis cult and the worship of Diana. So, of course, he made an exception for himself. The ships were loaded with bronze statues, carved wood, lead-lined plumbing, and roof tiles covered in gold and copper. One even had anchor systems so advanced, archaeologists used them to confirm what Roman anchors actually looked like. Some were ironed with wooden stocks. Others were just like modern-day Admiralty pattern anchors, except made 2,000 years ago. But the story gets more unbelievable. In the 1920s, Mussolini ordered the lake drained to recover these ships. It worked! Between 1928 and 1932, engineers dropped the lake level by over 20 meters, more than the height of a 6-story building. They pulled the ships out of the mud. They even built a museum around them. And then, boom! In 1944, during World War II, the museum caught fire. The ships burned. Some blamed German troops. Others said it was American artillery. A 2023 study reviewed all the evidence and confirmed that Allied shells probably started the fire by hitting the roof of the museum. The whole thing went up in flames. Today, only fragments survive, some charred wood, a few bronze pieces, and a panel from the ship's mosaic floor. Yeah, it was once a coffee table in a New York apartment. Now it's back in Italy, repatriated just a few years ago. From extravagant barges on a sacred lake to modern museum tragedy, the Nemi ships are a true mystery. Why build them? Why sink them? And how did Rome pull off so much advanced engineering in a freshwater crater lake? From lake palaces to underground tombs, now we're heading north of Rome to Volci. In 2012, a team of archaeologists was looking for the Tomb of the Sun and Moon, a site famous during the Grand Tour days of the 1700s. They didn't find it, but what they did find was even more bizarre. They discovered more than 20 Etruscan tombs. One of them had something no one expected: 2 silver hands lying in the central chamber. Not statues, not weapons, just hands, perfectly preserved. Open palms, fingernails coated in gold. One of them, the left, looked almost untouched by time. These weren't decorations. They were part of a sphereleton, a wooden dummy or effigy built to guard the soul of the dead. In this case, it likely represented the woman buried there. Threads of purple cloth, gold beads, amber, faience, and bone were also recovered. It wasn't a warrior's tomb. It was the resting place of someone with serious wealth and status. The silver hands were crafted with incredible detail. Most Etruscan funeral dummies had bronze hands, if they had them at all. Silver was rare. These hands weren't just made to impress. They were meant to protect. Ancient Greeks and Etruscans believed these effigies helped guide the spirit after death or shielded it from harm. Sometimes the effigy looked like the deceased. Other times it resembled a god or protector. This tomb opened a new window into Etruscan beliefs, especially around death, identity, and protection. And it reminded archaeologists that we barely scratched the surface of what this ancient civilization knew or believed. The Romans absorbed the Etruscans, but traces like these silver hands still whisper secrets through the soil. You've seen Roman temples. You've heard of Caesar, but have you ever heard of the black stone buried beneath the Roman Forum? The lapis niger, Latin for black stone, is one of the oldest and weirdest monuments in all of ancient Rome. It's not a statue, it's not a tomb, but it's surrounded by legends, and no one can fully explain it. This site was first unearthed in 1898 by Giacomo Boni, who led the Forum's excavation. Under a layer of black marble, he found an ancient shrine, and at its center, a stone pillar with an inscription written in one of the oldest known Latin scripts, boustrophedon style, meaning it reads one line left to right, the next right to left. The inscription is partially destroyed, but what remains is chilling. It talks about curses, forbidden acts, a king, and sacrifices. It has been translated to say things like, "Whosoever violates this grove, let him be cursed," and "Let the king find them, with a young animal for sacrifice." The stone itself dates back to around 570 to 550 BC, before the Roman Republic. That's when Rome was still ruled by kings. This discovery was the first hard evidence that kings actually reigned over early Rome, confirming stories historians once treated as myths. But the mysteries go deeper. Romans in Caesar's time didn't even know who was buried under the lapis niger. Some said it was Romulus, Rome's founder, killed by the Senate in the nearby temple of Vulcan. Others said it was Faustulus, the shepherd who raised Romulus and Remus, or Hostus Hostilius, grandfather of Rome's third king. But the truth? No one knows. What we do know is that for hundreds of years, generation after generation kept this place sacred. They buried animal bones, left offerings, and built new structures on top of the old altar. Black marble floors replacing burned layers of ritual gravel and ash. The pillar's inscription? It's not written in regular Latin. The letters are halfway between Greek and Latin. And because only half of each line remains, no one can fully decipher what it says. But what we do have points to a king, to punishments, and sacred rites. So what really happened under the lapis niger? Was it the grave of Rome's founder? A royal altar? A political stage? All we have is part of a curse, the oldest Latin ever carved in stone, and the kind of mystery that makes archaeologists come back year after year. If you're really into mysteries, ancient puzzles, and the kind of stories that make history feel alive, don't forget to like this video, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment with your favorite artifact, and turn on notifications so you never miss a twist in history.